Hello, and welcome to the From the Shadows podcast. I am the producer, Jason Lewis. I would like to thank you for tuning in to the From the Shadows podcast. And without further ado, here is your host, Shane Grove.
Welcome, everyone, to From the Shadows podcast. This is your host, Shane Grove, and we're doing this intro today. We're going to introduce all of our listeners to probably the most famous member of the podcast crew, other than Jerry, because we don't believe Jerry's really going to attain his level of certain fame until he dies trying to tackle Bigfoot. But with us in the studio today is Reese Redmond. How's it going, Reese?
I'm doing fine.
You're doing fine.
Yes.
Okay. Are you a little bit nervous?
Very.
Very nervous? Is it because Jerry and the judge are sitting on either side of you and they didn't shower, or what?
Kind of.
Kind of. Okay. All right. Well, we'll work through that. Okay. For those of you who do not know, Reese, almost on a weekly basis, does a little video called Reese's Something to Think About.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So in these videos, Reese gives everybody a little fun fact on the paranormal or just something crazy that what grade are you in? Third?
Yes.
Third grader would maybe cross her mind, although I'm not sure it's a normal third grade thought process, but Reese is a little above the curve, right?
Yes.
Think of yourself. Okay. So what spurred your interest in the paranormal and the fun fact sort of thing?
Probably when my dad started to watch Finding Bigfoot, and when my sister watched a lot of conspiracy theory videos.
Really? Okay. So what about that show did you find the most fascinating? Like, what really made you want to find out more?
Just
So you basically wanted to know more than what your dad knew. Is that what you're
Yes.
saying? Okay. All right. Well, I got a secret. It's not going to take a whole lot. Just, read maybe another book and you'll be all right.
yeah.
Okay. Hanging around the judge today might help out too.
A thirst for the unknown.
A thirst for the unknown. Yes, straight from the judge's mouth. So what's your favorite thing to do then when you're searching for new information about the unknown?
Probably to watch conspiracy theory videos and search what I'm trying to find out.
Search what you're trying to find out. Now, do you just take those conspiracy theory videos at face value, or do you try to do some more research and see if those people really know what they're talking about?
It just depends on what type of conspiracy theory it is, if it can really happen or if it's just nonsense.
Just nonsense. That's a good approach. So has your dad ever told you about the conspiracy theory about the rumor that he wore a medal on a date when he was in high school and was seen wearing such medal? Has he ever had you investigate that conspiracy theory?
No.
No? Okay.
Due to eyewitness accountability, it's very high probability that story's true.
Well, Reese, hey, we're glad you came in today to join us. We have a really cool interview that we are this is the introduction for. We're going to talk to Russell Acord from Expedition Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. Did you get to watch any of that show?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. It was probably your favorite show, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right. Well, we're excited to talk to Russell. So we're glad that you can join us for the introduction of this episode. And we're looking forward to your next Reese's Something to Think About. I know you got something up your sleeve, right?
Yes,
Right.
I very much so do.
Okay. So everybody out there that's listening, make sure you tune in to Reese's Something to Think About. We put it up on Instagram and our Facebook page. Every time she gives us one to put up, it's tons and tons of views every time it goes up. Lots of great comments. She's smiling from ear to ear.
I look forward to it each week.
Yeah, look forward to it. Because she, like I said, she probably can't even walk down the halls at Galleon Middle School without getting mobbed for autographs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, Jerry knows how you feel. He can't walk down the halls of Galleon Middle School without being accosted. but that's by the security. So, thanks again, Reese, for joining us, and we hope everybody enjoys the episode.
Goodbye.
Welcome, everyone, to the From the Shadows podcast. I'm your host, Shane Grove, and we have a full house here this morning. With us is the judge.
Good morning, everyone.
Jason, the super producer.
How's it going?
Some guy named Jerry.
Howdy, everyone.
And then our lead field researcher. What's your name?
Elisa.
Elisa. Okay, Elisa. All right. We have a super special guest this morning. He's joining us all the way from the great state of Washington. World famous, world renowned TV star, super agent, and International Bigfoot Conference organizer, Russell Acord. How you doing this morning, Russell?
I'm doing great. After an introduction like that, I don't know. That was pretty amazing.
Okay, well, I mean, if you don't feel you can
about?
live up to it, then let's I can start over and say, well, somebody who's very close to Jerry on the social.
So mean to me.
So, Russell, we're super excited to have you on this morning. I mean, the first thing we want to jump into is the television show that you guys just finished. The season just finished. Expedition Bigfoot. I assume most of the people that are listening to our podcast are fans of that show, and if you're not,
they're crazy.
Yeah, if not, you're crazy, because for our money, this was probably the best show that's been put out in the last, since I've been doing Bigfoot shows.
Yeah.
That is the most credible.
Yeah.
To go out and do in search of the elusive creature. So.
But Russ doesn't count as a creature, though.
Russ is, well, they found him right away.
Absolutely.
I found him a long time ago, though.
I was trying to find myself.
Well, if they're not going to watch his show, well, then we're going to come after them. The From the Shadows podcast crew will come after them.
Yeah. So
There you go.
Really, really excited about the show, Russell. I've had a chance to watch it. Really love the approach that you guys take to the show from a scientific standpoint. And we want to talk to you about the show, get some answers I think all of us have, but we also understand that because this is in the entertainment field, you're on TV, there's certain non-disclosure agreements that are signed, so you probably can't tell us certain things. So if we try to go down some back roads here where it's sort of off limits because of any non-disclosure agreements, just let us know.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So Russell, tell us how you came up with the idea for the show, Exhibition Bigfoot.
Oh, let's get all that squared away first. That was not my idea. The entire show was not my idea. This was something that the Travel Channel was. It was an idea that was pitched by someone, and I have no idea who, to the Travel Channel. Travel Channel worked with a company called Rail Splitters to put together a group of people to do what they wanted for the show. I wish it was my idea because it's brilliant. I like it, but it was not my idea. I was actually one of many people that got interviewed for the parts. That they wanted somebody who wasn't actually who actually did research. They wanted somebody who was a technician person to get equipment for us out on the show. They wanted somebody with a background, a very, very professional background. So that's where they picked up Dr. Maria. And I'll tell you, talk about a very, very smart person to have in the field with you. She was pretty good. But I'm a flesh and blood guy, and I think that's what they were looking for, was somebody who was strictly flesh and blood, doesn't, I'm a hard sell. I'm a big skeptic. I need a lot of evidence before I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to wrap my arms around that, and I'm going to say for sure this is definitive evidence. And then they wanted somebody who was also on that flesh and blood and interdimensional, somebody who would be willing to look at that kind of evidence if they came across any. So they went through a lot of people, came up with the cast that you saw on the show, and I think collectively we did I think we pretty much covered all the bases.
Yeah.
Cool. So how'd the interviews work?
Yeah.
I just wondering how, When they bring you in an interview, how does that work?
And what makes you? What do you think made you stand out above everybody else?
To me, I couldn't tell you. Realistically, I was absolutely amazed. We did a couple of Skype interviews. They did a lot of research. It's funny because something people should always know is if you're going to be hired for a job anywhere, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to troll you and vet you on your internet presence. They'll look at your Facebook, your pages. They'll talk to people that have worked with you or that know you or that actually interact with you on Facebook or those sorts of things. So they looked over everybody's history. They looked over everything. And if you have a very, very strong political opinion, regardless of what way, they'll tell you, look, you don't want to be controversial. You don't want to put things out there that is going to be, you have to remain fairly neutral and not have an opinion because, and I think that had a lot to do with it. I keep a lot of that stuff to myself. I listen, watch, I hover, but the thing is it surprised me. It did. It surprised me that they picked me because I know that there's just an incredible amount of absolutely qualified researchers out there from coast to coast. And maybe they just needed an old guy. Who knows?
Well, what I just gleaned from that is if they call the post office, I'm really screwed. I mean, I am just screwed. I'm not getting on any show. I'm not getting on any other podcast. Nothing. So, all
yeah.
right.
Would you like the picture that we have on the wall?
So did you? How much did you like? So the show, they bring you guys all together, and how much prep work? I mean, there had to be a lot of prep work about what you guys were going to go do and attempt to go find as far as the research. I mean, how much prep work did you guys spend before you guys actually got out into the field and started investigating?
So I can't speak for Dr. Maria. I know that I have the idea from what they told me only. They didn't get very much prep work at all. They said, be ready to do boots on the ground, get in the dirt, and do research the way you do research. We're going to set up a base camp, and you guys are just going to be shoved out in the field, and you'll know the location when you drive onto it. We didn't know. Nobody knew. It was just before we were going to show up. They said, okay, you got to show up at this address. Go. So for me, they flew in, and with their gear, they flew in, and then they were transported by the network onto location where we were going to be. Me, I live close enough. I jumped in my truck. My truck is prepared. I can go jump out in my truck right now and live 3 months out in the wilderness with just the gear that I have on there and the MREs and food and everything else. I'm always ready and always on the go with that truck.
Nice.
It's got my night vision goggles, thermal imaging. It's got everything you can imagine for research. It's all there. So I can just grab my keys. If somebody says you got to go, the only thing I need are my keys. I got clothes, boots, everything's in that truck.
Thus the title of survivalist.
There you go. Survive. Yep.
That's probably where it comes from. Yeah. So we all showed up on location, and that was my first time with eyes on the location. We went straight into where we were going to do base camp and set up camp. It was just kind of an amazing journey because for me, all I wanted to do was get the backpack loaded up, get the hell out of my truck, and get away from everybody. Because that's how I do my research. I don't really enjoy big crowds. I'll go to conferences and that sort of thing, and I'll have my fun. And it sounds weird that I say that because I put on a.
I was going to say you put on like a huge conference. You put on a huge conference. You want a lot of crowd.
Yeah, it's true. But my comfort zone actually is in, literally, comfort zone would be in the woods. Quiet, alone, watching, digging in, and just, I love it there.
Well, let me ask you this. Based upon that experience and based upon your survival skills, are you going to be on Naked and Afraid?
It's funny you say that, because I'm actually I've actually interviewed for two things. One of them is Naked and Afraid, and the other one is Alone.
Well, now this is not to be confused with the proposed show starring Jerry. He's naked and we're all afraid. That's
including Bigfoot.
Including Bigfoot.
Oh my gosh.
Bigfoot will be like,
even Bigfoot says that's too much.
I give up. If this guy's trying to tackle me, I quit.
So tell us how do you and I know it's a little bit off, but how do you apply to get on a show like Naked and Afraid? Because I'm the person that would show up and they'd say, okay, you got to get naked. I'm like, no, or the bugs are going to eat my flesh off of me. I'm never going to make it 5 minutes into the show. How do you apply?
I got to be honest. I don't think anybody's telling you to get naked. I mean, really? Are you trying to sell that to us?
None of us want that here.
So how do you apply for a show like that?
It's basically you throw your hat in the ring. The network producer that I work with, I asked him. I said, "What do you know about this? How can how can I make contact with a couple of shows that I'd like to be part of?" And he said, "Well, actually, we're based out of L.A. I know I work directly with those people." I said, "Well, let's meet, let's talk, let's figure out what we got to do, because I want to be on that show." So that was the way it worked for me. I don't know how you would do that without having somebody that you could beg your way through the doorway to get an application in.
So what do you think the odds are you're going to get on the show?
I know it takes time. I'd say a 50-50 chance, just like anybody else.
Awesome.
It just depends. I didn't have to send any pictures of me standing out in the woods, in a nudist colony or anything. I just, I'm sure they look over your resume.
Imagine signing those 8x10 action figures or action photos.
Well, I got to be honest. I think that based upon the success of your current show, I think you would make a great candidate to be on.
He's Russell. He can do anything he wants.
Yeah.
So what about the show?
I would love it.
So Russell, what about the show? Once you get out there, once you get on site, you get to base camp. And for those who haven't watched the show, go watch it. But I remember watching the first episode saying, okay, what's going to happen? So when you get base camp set up, how do you guys decide, all right, this is going to be our plan of attack. This is what we're going to do to try to prove existence of Bigfoot?
So before the whole show even started, we did discuss a few things. One of the things that the showrunner asked me, he said, what sets you apart from other researchers? I said, really, I couldn't tell you. I said, for me, I would be just as satisfied with getting dropped off 40 miles out, leave me there. And then I'll work my way back to base camp. I'll be there in, 4 or 5 weeks. I don't care. Just put me out there. And that was kind of the idea. They said, okay, so we need somebody that's going to get out there and go as far away from base camp as possible. And when we got to camp, I got to look at a topical map, and I said, okay, this looks like pretty high country right here. I want to start high and work my way down. I don't want it to be an uphill battle the whole time. So for me, my objective was to go to the highest position I could as quick as I could, and then just start methodically working my way down through the country back towards base camp. So I found a route that would actually take me off to the side to where I wouldn't go into the research area that I really wanted to be in. I went far to the right and tried to circle up to the right and get to the top of this high point, and then I would work my way down. And that didn't work out because we had a couple things that took place with one of the other members of the crew. He got sick really bad, and for me, I'm carrying my pack. We threw my pack on the scale. It weighed 84 pounds. So I'm working uphill with an 84-pound pack and loving it. I'm thinking, I can't believe I'm doing this. It was just me, one other guy. The other guy is ex-military, tough as nails, and he brought a camera with him in a day pack because he would come back out to where he could get to the crew, and they'd get him into camp or get him to where he needed to go. He didn't always stay out there with me. So away we went. I'm headed up the side of this hill, and they said, "Hey, you got to come back to base camp." And I'm thinking, "Are you kidding me? I've worked my butt off to get this high with this pack." So I set up a small camp there and left all the real heavy equipment there. I think it was just senseless to carry all that burden weight because I have a lot of, well, with my thermal imaging, my night vision goggles, I have a lot of metal. So I shed off as much of the weight as I possibly could. And then it was much easier getting back down to base camp because it was all freaking downhill.
So those who haven't watched the show, one of your team members gets really, really sick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so there were some theories as to that. You want to talk about those, or?
Yeah, bottom line, we don't know. That was whatever got to RPG. He got sick, and from what they were telling me, he got really sick. It was take your worst migraine, and then be sick on top of it, and not able to keep any food down, and he couldn't get rid of it. It was just tearing him up, and when I heard about it, you always hear about the infrasound theory. But to date, even though he went and saw a couple of different doctors, nobody knows. He doesn't know. And for me, if that had happened to me, I'd be thinking, you take your car to the shop and they say, "Yeah, it seems to be running fine. You're in great shape. Just go." I wouldn't be satisfied with that answer. It's like, okay, you're thinking that it's okay. You're telling me to not worry about it, but I don't trust what happened to me without an answer. So, but he doesn't have any answers, which is really odd, and he hasn't had anything affect him like that since.
So he's fully recovered from whatever was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. He was fully recovered within days of getting back home and off that site. So whatever, there's theories of maybe he ate something that was just kicking his butt. Maybe the altitude changed. Maybe. Nobody knows.
Maybe was it Ronnie LeBlanc that replaced him then? Maybe
Correct. Yes.
Maybe it was some shenanigans from him trying to. I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe he really wanted to get on the show and he knew he was next up and.
Well, when you ask about preparation time, it's funny you say that because they got hold of Ronnie. Ronnie didn't know. Ronnie was thrown in there as, "Hey, you should take a look at this guy. He's similar to what you had with RPG. He does have the interdimensional thought process. He also believes in flesh and blood. He's a really, really smart cat. He's got knowledge, a really good knowledge base, and he's fearless." So they called him up and they said, "Hey, are you interested in this?" And he said, "Well, heck yeah, I'm interested in that. Who wouldn't be? Blah blah blah." And they said, "Well, that's great news because I know it's Wednesday night, but we need you on the plane Friday morning."
And he turned around and he was standing. "I'm already here."
Yeah.
He jumped on the plane.
So he had no idea that there was even a show in process. When they called him up, he was because we had to keep it quiet.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that's an amazing opportunity for him. Unfortunately for the other guy,
For RPG.
Yeah.
So
that's why I was telling you, Ronnie had zero prep time. He didn't even have the couple, month in advance to be excited about it. It was from zero to you're in it.
Wow. So when you're talking about elevation, Pacific Northwest, how much elevation are we talking about? Because you go from sea level to however many thousand feet above sea level, and it's hard. Altitude.
Yeah, in my area, I was looking where I wanted to go to was a little over 6,000 square feet, or 6,000 square feet. Oh my goodness, elevation of over 6,000 feet.
I
I have not had enough coffee yet this morning.
I have some for you, Russ.
6,000 feet elevation is not that high. I've been much, much higher. But if you think about, I think RPG lives at a much lower elevation than that. So that's strictly a theory. I'm strictly talking out of just possibilities. I have no knowledge, what got to him, but elevation changes definitely affect some people, and that was just one of the ideas I threw out there is all.
So walk us through the show then, without giving away everything that happens in the show, because we want our listeners to go watch it. But tell us, strategies that you guys employed to try in the field to say, look, we want to take a very scientific approach to this. We're going to try to prove the existence of this creature. So can you tell us some of the strategies you guys used?
It was a lot of technology that we used. The base camp deployed something that the Department of Defense hasn't even used yet, but it's a thing that will triangulate where vocalization or where a sound comes from. So they actually tried some vocalizations, recorded alleged vocalizations of a Bigfoot, and they played those, but they had already set up this equipment to see if you did get a response, where they could triangulate where that response came from. And that was part of the show. The other, several other things were, for me, mine was much more simple. I have my own 2 pair of my own military grade night vision goggles. You know how when you're watching the TV show and the guy puts the things on his eyes and he had one little lens out the front and he can see everything in green and just walk around. I've got 2 pair of night vision goggles, one for me and one for my camera guy if he ended up wanting to use them. I have thermal imaging. I have audio recording equipment. I have just basic camera and trail cams that I carried with me too. But mine was more about getting out there. I wanted to go to the high elevation and get the furthest away from base camp and just kind of work down towards them. They had plenty to research in their area where they just would go out a day or 2 at a time and get into whatever they could find. They were looking for tracks, anything, any disturbances, any hairs, anything that would give them any indication. For me, it was the same. I would be out there doing my research, looking, listening, watching, and the one thing that was really interesting, I did come across a hand-built nest or something that was nothing like they have at the Olympic Project. It was not indicative of what a gorilla would build, but it was something that maybe you or I would build if we just wanted to seek shelter in the woods. It was hand-built, covering and nesting materials on the bottom, where if it was just a big storm coming and we wanted to get in out of the mess, that's where we would hide. That was very, very interesting, but what made it twice as creepy is there was a dead hawk, a fully intact dead hawk 6 feet from the opening of this thing, which is mind-blowing, because you wonder, how could whatever built it, why would there be a hawk out in front of it, and how often do you find a fully intact dead hawk in the woods? So it was just some very, very peculiar and weird things. So I got that we marked that on a GPS, and I said, okay, I called back to base camp. I said, you guys need to have a look at this, because Dr. Maria is a primatologist. She would recognize if the nest was something indicative of what would be built by a gorilla or a primate.
Sure.
The dead hawk still creeps me out, because I have no idea why in the heck a dead hawk would be. So that was, but I thought, okay, we'll let Ronnie and Dr. Maria sort through that, because I need to keep moving. So I just kind of turned that over. I'm looking for something big and hairy and fuzzy and angry and 6-8 feet tall that's running through the forest. I wanted something that I could put my hands on. I don't know that I'd literally put my hands on it and wrestle it to the ground like some of you guys might, but I would.
Well, yeah, we're
Calm down, Jerry. Calm
Yeah.
down. That's just me that would attempt to take it down.
attempt to take
So
it
let
down.
me ask you this, Russell. There was some technology that was able to map, I guess what you would call game trails.
Right.
So I found that pretty fascinating because when you go over the Pacific Northwest or any heavily wooded area from an aerial view, it just looks like a mass of just green. And if you're try to traverse it on foot, it just so dense. But you guys were able to find a series of trails using some technology. And can you explain to us how exactly that worked? That technology.
I hope I say it right. I want to say LiDAR. It's a drone.
Yeah.
It's a big giant drone. It fits in the back of a truck. It's really probably 3 feet wide or so. It was just a big drone that has cameras on it. So let's just take the example of you're running a 16 millimeter film like the Patterson Gimlin film, and you're filming, and as you take this drone and just roll the reel, right? As it rises up over a hill and back down the other side, it's getting a clip of every segment of that tree as you come up the side of it, over the top of it, and down the other side of it. So when you're done, you have a very, very good indication of the size of all the trees because you've seen every single angle of them, and then you've seen the angle of every single bump, nook, and cranny that you can see through the leaves on this, as you're going up and over top of. So you got a great look at the trees, the rocks, the contour of the land. So you put all those frames of 16 millimeter film together, and it comes down to a 3D picture. That was a very, very lazy description of how, as this drone goes through, it's taking rapid fire pictures of everything along the way and looking down at the earth as it travels. So you're catching everything, all the details, and then it comes back, collects all that information, and you can actually look at it as if you're looking through the trees, and it shows you the ground scan, it shows you the tree scan, it shows you the leaves, the canopy, depending on which lens you want to see it through. And we were able to find a lot of detail of the trails and the water sources and just landscape contour that we wanted to research and look into. So that was a heck of a mapping device for us to plan where they would go, where I would go, where we would meet. Just an amazing piece of technology.
I think it's the same technology that they're using in the Amazon to try to find lost ruins and things like that. It's an incredible piece of equipment.
So you've been out hunting and researching Bigfoot, Sasquatch for how many years do you suppose?
Since the mid to late 70s. So I'd say 45 years.
Okay, so you haven't always got to go out with this kind of technology. Do you find it like, obviously it's a little bit easier, but do you remember the good old days where you just you're out there, just your eyes and ears and feet looking for trying to find those game trails instead of somebody mapping it out for? I mean, sure, it's a little bit easier maybe, but which do you like better?
Be honest with you, the 70s, getting a backpack and having the National Forest Bitterroot Valley backpack with a Bitterroot Valley Forest Service map on it, and you have to learn how to read a map, elevations and that sort of thing and where trails are. I would just head out on the trails, follow my map, and don't laugh, but I had my Polaroid camera with several things of film in it, to where if I got something, I would have a Polaroid picture of it. That was the only camera I had back then. And then I finally worked my way up to the film. It was a Pentax K1000 35 millimeter film camera, and I would carry that around. And I thought I was Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, all those bad, tough guys all in one cruising through the mountains. But I not knowing what I was going after, and this might sound naive, but back then I was a hunter. So I carried a weapon with me thinking, I'll take pictures of anything I can, but if something charges me, I have to protect myself. But I never, that was never an issue. It never came up, but if it did, I'd have a lot of great Polaroid pictures of it.
Did you ever run into any bears while you were out there?
Always. There were. I've seen so much wildlife out in the mountains of Montana: deer, elk, bear, cats, wolverines, porcupines, you name it. I've seen it. Wolves, coyotes. Back then, where I was at, I was a young kid. I was 13 years old, walking through the forest with a 44 Super Blackhawk on my hip and a backpack full of Polaroid film and binoculars and a big hunting knife, and I was fearless.
Clearly, you did not possess the right type of weaponry to stop a black bear, brown bear, grizzly bear.
Are you kidding? Do you know what a 44 Super Blackhawk is?
44 will do it.
That'll go through a bear skull.
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, I have
absolutely.
one.
Yeah, okay. You watch your Dirty Harry Clint Eastwood movie, and he'll describe the world's.
Oh, okay. You got a 44 Magnum.
44
Okay.
Super Black.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was. I wasn't that big of a guy, but what I carried was more than adequate. But not once did I ever get cornered by a mountain lion, a bear, or anything. I not once. As soon as they have human contact, generally, unless you're standing between a mama bear and her cubs, they're going to roll off and just put distance between you. They want nothing to do with you.
So let's fast forward then to the show, and it was something that you and I discussed last night. Basically, one of the highlights of the show is using now today's technology, what you were able to capture, okay? And this just made me think about because you told me the distance last night you estimated at what you captured on the infrared, and I'm thinking, hearing you talk about being out there in the 70s, how many times you were that close to something back then and just had no idea because you didn't have the infrared to tell you.
I know.
So,
who knows? I mean, I probably stepped over a log with Bigfoot hiding underneath of it in the 70s. I wouldn't have known. So, the infrared, the thermal imaging it's designed to pick up anything that's different from the basic temperature outside. So it'll show you something that's warmer than your overall temperature. So you'll see there's, I think even on the show, there was a short blip of it where I was actually watching a bat fly in the air with this thermal imaging, because it shows up this little, it just shows up with the heat that the little body has. I saw deer and elk through the thermal imaging, and their contrast of the outside temperature with them, showed up white. Sometimes a little bit of color of red, depending on how close I was to it. But I caught something on the thermal imaging that was several hundred yards away. And when it showed up on the show, you'll see that I'm looking through the thermal imaging, and I see this big red heat signature. And red means it's extremely hot. A deer, you'll see later on, is white hot. Mm-hmm. So the hotter it gets, you get to red and yellow, and you're talking smoking hot. So this thing was definitely, it surprised me, and instinctively, I take my eyes off the thermal and I look up out into the vast darkness, thinking that I'm going to see something, which was really kind of dumb that I did that, but that's neither here nor there. There was nothing to see. It looked back at the thermal imaging, and I'm watching this thing, and what I'm trying to do with my device is I click the enhance, which will actually expand the thing to where I can see it better. Zoom in, I guess. So I zoomed in on it. I'm trying to zoom in on it. As I'm zooming in on it, it's articulating and moving in just kind of a very odd fashion, and then it disappeared. So that was disturbing, because something that's that hot and that big that vanishes into thin air, I don't like that, because I don't understand it.
Yeah, I understand.
And
We have
then-
those FLIR cameras at work. Same thing. Something disappears like that, it gets you worried.
So
You wonder where it's going to show up next.
Right, right.
Come on.
So, for purposes of heat signature, we talked about this, and I think this explained was really well on the show, is that the deer shows up white because it is covered in fur, and that fur blocks some of the heat signature. So what you picked up on the infrared that was burning red had to be something that did not possess a hide, like a deer or an elk or something like this. So it was,
Or even a bear, probably.
or even a bear.
Bear.
So it would be more, and from looking at, from obviously you guys broke it down, but it looked to me like a bipedal, whatever it was, with arm swing to it. And it wouldn't have had hide on it like an animal, like a deer, elk, or even a bear. So real fascinating to see that and see its movement. And then just disappears.
Right. So I've got theories on that, where I was trying to work my head around it. Okay, I'm thinking what could take heat and make it dissipate quickly. So it would have to be something pretty solid for it to get behind. But when we looked at the area the next day, there was really nothing for it to hide behind. And I got to see for the first time, I was out of the field and back home doing my regular job, working on the nuke site, when they were able to get the analysis done and do the side-by-side comparison, when I had actually gone out the next day and stood similar to where I thought it was. So they did a side-by-side analysis of my heat trace and the heat trace that I had picked up, the day prior on the thermal imaging. So it was my first time seeing it when I was watching the show. And I thought, holy crap, I'm over 6 feet tall, 250 pounds, and I put out a pretty good thermal. Well, whatever it was that I got on those thermal imaging made me look small and much hotter than me. And it did surprise me, the actual size of whatever it was. That, to me, was a big surprise. The second thing that actually confused me was, where did that heat go? Where do you take that much heat and make it vanish in an open field? Now, about 100 yards from me, this thing was, I would say, several hundred yards away. So it would have had to approach me pretty fast to get to the little trickling water that was between the two of them. There's a little creek in there. It would literally have to run and advance towards me at a very rapid pace and jump in that water in order to make the heat disappear. That wasn't the case. You saw what I was seeing, and it just simply calmly just disappeared. There was no moving about or rushing of any type, and it didn't get closer to me before it disappeared.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time that we have this week. So tune in next week as we continue this episode with Russell Acord. And for all the people out here, as few as they may be, that are not familiar with Russell Acord, he's the co-host of that famous series, only found on the Travel Channel, called Expedition Bigfoot. We look forward to having him back to finish this episode. And in the meanwhile, on Wednesdays, stay tuned for a new project that we have. We call it the Midweek Howl, where our very own crew member, the Ozark Howler, will discuss some of the stories, and they're all true stories, that he's had over the years, many years of law enforcement and working in the federal government. So stay tuned. We appreciate you listening to our program and look forward to having you back next week. Thank you. Please visit us on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/From the Shadows Podcast, and on our Instagram page at instagram.com/From the Shadows Podcast. You can visit our webpage at fromtheshadowspodcast.godaddysites.com or contribute to our Facebook discussion page called After the Shadows. And tweet us on our Twitter feed at twitter.com/podcast_from. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you all. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.